It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another Real Estate Podcast, the largest podcast library in Australia, talking property, also trends and what is happening in your local area. From Darwin to Perth and every city in between, we cover it. And welcome if you are a new listener in 2025. You can hear us on multiple platforms, including iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Amazon. And don't forget to tell a friend who might be just like you, bent towards finding out about the Australian property market. And today, Tuesday morning, January the 28th, the LA fires. Right now, let's catch up with Kevin DaSilver. He's in California. He's the principal of a real estate company in Manhattan Beach in Los Angeles. And good morning to you, Kevin. Welcome to the Real Estate Breakfast. Great to have you on.
Thank you for having me on. And 2025 has started very busy. It was busy even before the fires took place, and now it's just gotten even busier, having displaced so many households.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these predictions, because people have made predictions maybe towards the end of 2024, and suddenly those predictions are completely crushed if they are in Los Angeles, because the fire, and I'm guessing that this is you as well, the fire has kind of destroyed the initial 2025 prediction for your area.
That's absolutely correct. My prediction for this year had been that prices would rise moderately. And if the interest rates came down to reflect the federal funds rate that has taken place over the fourth quarter of last year, then that would accelerate price appreciation here in the coastal Los Angeles area. However, the fires have displaced over 10,000 households. And those people have moved into the surrounding communities, which has, for lack of a better word, heated up the local markets inside of the different cities along the coastline.
So when these fires broke out, give us a sense from a real estate person. You're a principal, you run your own company there. Give us a sense of just what happened with your phone, how many calls that you were getting. When you engage with a real estate person, a real estate company, particularly if you've done that a few times, it's kind of like this close-knit person, this company that you're dealing with that you can turn to in terms of a crisis. And, short of saying you become a grief counsellor, give us a sense of some of those phone calls, people that you know, I guess the real concern that was coming through with what you were receiving.
A number of individuals whom I know who have been displaced from the Palisades fire, is just making sure that they were okay, offering, other services, food, blankets, anything they might need. They basically were given very short notice to pack up their belongings and to leave. Shortly thereafter, though, with the rental market going into overdrive, other people not affected by the fire have actually started to reach out. I mean, the smoke that covered most of Los Angeles at one point in time, has people who had been considering leaving all of a sudden expediting those plans and wanting to do those sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I had a thought, when these fires were breaking out, all those transactions that took place, days leading up to the fires, somebody has sold up only for a new owner to come along and get caught up in these fires. That's no doubt something that you've probably, if you haven't been directly affected by that, you've no doubt heard those stories.
Yes, I mean, the fires that are happening, the Eaton fire, there's a new fire in Santa Clarita, I don't know its name, the Palisades fire, all of these fires are going to increase insurance costs here in Los Angeles. So, but yes, for the people who, just by stroke of luck happened to sell their homes right before these fires took place, like I said, it's a stroke of luck. And for the people who moved in, the Palisades fire swept through neighborhoods which were not adjacent to fire hazards. It's just the wind direction took it clear to the coast, and these homes had never burned, had never been in threat of burning, and here we are, they're gone.
Now, you've been there for some time. How surprising was what unfolded to you as you first started watching it unfold, news reports, television, etc.? How much of a gobsmacking scenario was that when you actually saw it? Was it total disbelief?
Oh, yeah. So I was actually sitting in my office and I can see Malibu and the Palisades. And I was on a Zoom call and I looked out to the right. I noticed a big plume of smoke coming over. And I started to look it up, and sure enough, it was a fire. I mean, it started out as a regular fire, but I mean, we were talking about 60 to 80 mile per hour winds swept it through the neighborhood. Days later, it became apparent that the entire neighborhood was gone. The entire community from the edge of the brush all the way to the ocean just burnt. And I've never seen anything like it in my life.
Now, you talked about the insurance. From the rising costs and availability of insurance to the challenges of filing claims or even securing coverage in these high-risk areas, this is just going to be a complete nightmare, isn't it, over the next God knows how long for people to negotiate with their insurers. Again, you'll hear these stories directly, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm already hearing these stories. And the reality, there's two major fires and obviously the new one in Santa Clarita going on. The other fires are away from an area called the coastal zone. So the coastal zone is part of the Coastal Commission. Any construction needs to be reviewed by the Coastal Commission. It's a state organization that manages development and redevelopment near the coastline. Typically, in the coastal zone, it can take 2 to 3 years to get approval for large construction projects. Any new construction, adding more than 10% to a home, increasing the height by more than 10%, these all trigger a review by the Coastal Commission. And so they already run slow. I actually do have a client who has a house in Malibu that burnt in 2019, and he still hasn't started construction on it. Now, the Los Angeles Department of Building and Safety does move faster. That is great, except for the fact that they have more than 2,000 housing starts that are about to start as soon as the fire is eradicated. They're going to be overwhelmed by the amount of plan submitted for review and the amount of individuals seeking to get permits to rebuild.
No question. And here's a question which anybody in Los Angeles has already thought about, and that is, are there particular types of policies or coverage that buyers need to be aware of when purchasing properties in fire-prone areas? Of course, what was probably in place prior to these fires, those policies will no doubt be like quicksand. They will be constantly moving away from what they probably were by the insurers.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, some of the policies that if you have the luxury of obtaining are loss of use, where you're actually covered for your inability to use the home for expenses, lodging, rental, anything that you need during your stay away from the house that has since burned down. However, not all policies allow this. In fact, for a number of years, and it really got expedited after the 2019 fires swept through both Southern California, Northern California. Some towns up in Northern California just vanished from the fires. It was horrible. But some areas became uninsurable. And so California created basically a California-sanctioned insurance policy called the California Fair Plan. However, it doesn't always come with some of these benefits that other insurance companies provide. Like, for the California Fair Plan, I was on the phone earlier with a friend of mine who lost his house, unfortunately, and his adjuster that he's hired to help him navigate this has said that he probably won't see any money for at least a year.
And in terms of properties, prior to this particular large-scale event, have you seen properties devalue due to their location in wildfire-prone areas? That's just going to affect the mindset of homeowners trying to sell. That's been deemed as a really prone area.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just like we talked about, where homes are uninsurable. And it takes the California Fair Plan in order to obtain insurance for the house. The California Fair Plan is not the cheapest plan. It doesn't come with some of the best benefits that you would get from some of the other insurance providers. So simply the higher cost of insurance has made it less desirable to live in these areas. And one example is the Hollywood Hills. Prior to 2019, the Hollywood Hills was a very hot market, no pun intended. People were moving up. It's got great views. You could see, in certain parts of it, you can see all the way from the ocean to downtown Los Angeles. It's really a beautiful area. But between the insurance costs and how expensive it was and, how these fires it doesn't matter whether you have a 1,000 square foot home or a 10,000 square foot home, the fires, they don't have any prejudice. They just burn everything. And so, people don't like being around that space where their home can just be burnt up. So as a result, the housing market slowed down. You really saw a significant buyer's market in those areas.
With these fires, have you heard in terms of the devalue in these locations? Is there a sense that you're kind of grappling with what sort of percentage, whether it's, 20%, 30%, 40% down on what the value of those properties were? Is there any sort of a sense to that?
It's hard to give the exact value of the devaluation, and the reason being is that since 2019, we've seen two economic factors come into play. We saw the pandemic and then interest rates at all-time lows. Then rates more than doubled, causing the housing market to screech to a halt here in the United States. So to put in perspective, while most of the neighborhoods and communities in Los Angeles during the pandemic and the ultra-low interest rates saw a huge, sometimes even doubling effect on the value and prices in the neighborhood, areas like the Hollywood Hills did not see that appreciation. It lost out on about 20 to 30% of its appreciation potential. And really, it was just prices stayed flat while other communities rose. When rates doubled and the housing market screeched to a halt, we saw that market move in line with the depreciation that we saw everywhere else. So really, it just never took back off, and it has stayed relatively 20, 30% below its potential.
It's hard to sort of second guess where this is going to land, because if you're selling a property that's been affected, that's been wiped out, people might be listing the land, but the real estate companies might be saying, well, we're probably not going to be able to sell that for you. It's hard to imagine how there is going to be such a bounce back. But you do have a lot of people that are saying, no, hang on, I'm not going to sell. I'm actually going to rebuild. I am going to firmly stay planted where I've got all these memories, where I've got this community, where my friends and family are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the different fires in Los Angeles have struck different neighborhoods at the moment. I think in the Palisades, where the fire, the direction, the wiping out of the entire neighborhood was just the perfect mixture of wind and a fire and the wind direction. It basically turned into a neighborhood fire. It wasn't even a forest fire anymore. In that area where it's very unlikely that this is going to happen again and the city is going to do something about preventing it from happening again, I can definitely see the people going back. I mean, it's one of the premier neighborhoods of Los Angeles. I can't say the same for the Altadena area, where the neighborhood was so integrated with the forest. In fact, just a couple weeks before the fire, I was showing properties in the community. It's like a city built into the forest. For some of those people, they might not have the same appetite for hanging around.
Yeah, and such a great idea, isn't it, to pull out of the global warming Paris Accord? I mean, what a great idea that was.
The droughts in California are becoming longer, which is just makes it even worse for the fires. The rains are more significant. So when we get the rain, we get more of it, which fuels the growth in vegetation. And then the extended droughts create a bigger opportunity for fires to just take off. I mean, horrible timing.
It is definitely a tricky start to 2025, Kevin, and thank you so much for giving us a little bit of an insight into what you personally have been experiencing there in Los Angeles. The Palisade, of course, fires have been all encompassing with the devastation in that particular location. It'll be interesting to watch that to see whether or not they bounce back. And thanks for coming on, and talk another time.
Thank you for having me on. I look forward to the next time.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.